Hey guys, it's me, Seren, back with another video. So I just got back from seeing The Magnificent Seven with Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt and Ethan Hawke and Vincent D'Onofrio. I feel like I never know how to pronounce his name, even though I love him so much. Matter of fact, let me give you the full entire cast. Denzel Washington, Chris Pratt, Ethan Hawke, Vincent D'Onofrio. Please let me know if I'm saying that right. Lee Byung-hun, Manuel Garcia, Rolfo, Martin Seinsmeyer, Haley Bennett, and Peter Sarsgaard. That's the full main cast. And I loved it so much, and it was directed by Antoine Fuqua, who previously directed Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke in Training Day, which I'm sure we've all seen. And I loved it. It was so good. I highly recommend it. I'm going to try and give this little review recap without any spoilers, because the movie it actually just came out. It's only been out like a week or two. So for anyone that hasn't still seen it, I'm going to try and do this review without any spoilers. But I'm going to say that I loved it. So it is a remake of a 1960 movie that was also called The Magnificent Seven, that it itself was an old Western remake of a Japanese movie called Seven Samurai. I have not seen Seven Samurai, and I also have not seen the original Magnificent Seven. I'm probably going to try and watch Seven Samurai. I don't know if I'm going to want to watch the original Magnificent Seven because, like I said, it came out in 1960, and it's kind of like a quintessential, cowboy film, Old West film, the type of film that made Clint Eastwood famous, starring Yul Brynner and a bunch of other white people. And the main cast, the Magnificent Seven, is like all these white men. It's like stacked with these like white men, like quintessential cowboy, white man saves the day, cowboys and Indians trope. I say Native Americans, but I'm saying that because, the trope or whatever. So I just want to say that even going into the Magnificent Seven, I saw the first Magnificent Seven trailer when I saw Suicide Squad at the beginning of this summer in like June, which I never did a review for Suicide Squad, but I did really love it. Like, I loved it. So if you guys do want a video on me talking about Suicide Squad, even though Suicide Squad has kind of come and gone at this point, like, let me know in the comments, and I don't mind making a video on that, because I love Suicide Squad. I'm kind of like low-key obsessed with it, because I'm a DC fan. I prefer DC to Marvel. So I saw the first Magnificent Seven trailer when I was watching Suicide Squad, and I was just like, oh, this looks so good. I have to see it. Look at this cast. Look at this diverse cast. Because I feel like a lot of the quintessential Western, the Clint Eastwood films, the Yul Brynner films, the Reach for the Sky and Tell Me About It, there's this idea of the Old West, of the Wild West, of the American frontier, and it's very white, right? And it's very whitewashed. It's revisionist history. It's white supremacist history, because it's white supremacist fantasy, because in real life, there were a lot of Mexicans, because California used to be fucking Mexico. So in the West, there were so many Mexicans, and so many cowboys were Mexicans, that words like lasso, corral, buckaroo, which came from the word vaquero, like all these things are Mexican lexicon and dialect and culture that got co-opted into this, American this idea of American cowboys, but they wrote Mexicans out of their own history, basically. Also had almost a quarter of the cowboys were also African American. You know what? I should look up the exact statistics for you. Old West. I'm going to tell you guys the exact demographics. Let me tell you. American Frontier. Demographics. There we go. Race and ethnicity. African Americans moved west as soldiers, as well as cowboys, farmhands, saloon workers, cooks, and outlaws. The Buffalo Soldiers were soldiers in the all-black 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiments and 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments of the Army. They had white officers and served in numerous Western forts. About 4,000 blacks came to California in Gold Rush days. In 1879, after the end of Reconstruction in the South, Several thousand freedmen moved from southern states to Kansas. Known as the Exodusters, they were lured by the prospect of good, cheap homestead law land and better treatment. The all-black town of Nicodemus, Kansas, which was founded in 1877, was an organized settlement, right? So there were a lot of fucking black people. There were a lot of African Americans. Moving on. Asians. The California Gold Rush included thousands of Mexicans and Chinese arrivals. Chinese migrants, many of whom were impoverished peasants, provided the major part of the workforce for the building of Central Pacific portion of the Transcontinental Railroad. I feel like I've talked about this in other videos before, but I remember when I was in junior high school, I did a history project on the Transcontinental Railroad. I bought one of those science fair boards, the kind that so you have the trifold board, so you have the middle, and you have the two flaps on the side that close and you can open them up. And I remember I decorated it because I was an overachiever. I was a straight A student. I remember I decorated the front. I drew the train on the front, like the two halves with the light and everything. And then I opened it up, and the inside was the railroad tracks, and I had like all these facts, and like it was like a really cool project. It was a really cool project. And I remember in doing the research for my project on the Transcontinental Railroad, learning that the Chinese Americans, did the bulk of the work. Like, they built that railroad. Like, there were a lot of Chinese Americans and Chinese immigrants in this country and in the Wild West, you know? Like, there were a lot of African Americans. There were a lot of Chinese people. There were a lot of, you know, Mexicans and Latinx, or, you know, Hispanic, whichever you prefer. And a lot of people don't prefer Hispanic nowadays, but it says Hispanics in Wikipedia, so I'm just going to read you guys what it says. The great majority of Hispanics who had been living in the former territories of New Spain remained and became American citizens in 1848. The 10,000 or so lived in California, in Southern California, and after 1880 were overshadowed by the hundreds of thousands of arrivals from the east. Those in New Mexico dominated towns and villages that changed little until well into the 20th century, right? So you have, again, a lot of black people, lots of African Americans, lots of freed blacks that went west. You had lots of Chinese immigrants, lots of Chinese Americans that found work building the Transcontinental Railroad, and you had lots and lots, tens of thousands of Mexicans, because this whole entire state of California used to be Mexico, right? So when you watch a movie like the original, which, again, this is a remake of a Japanese film, right, which was whitewashed into this, you know, white supremacist fantasy. When you watch the original Magnificent Seven with 7 white, you know, male archetypes of masculinity and, you know, American ideals and the Wild West and the Old West and the American frontier, there's this really good quote from one of those famous white dude authors where he says, you know, Europeans went out west and became Americans. Like, that was how they became Americans. That's how, like, these American ideals of, like, working hard and working the land and forging something new, you know, like, that is where these ideals came from the spreading out into the West. And of course, there were tons and tons and tons and tons and tons, millions of Native Americans that had their land stolen from them and that were killed, you know, as a result of genocide, of disease, population control, putting them in reservations, right? So, like, when you watch these old Westerns with a cast stacked full of white men, again, like, it's not historically accurate, because people will look you in your face and say, there were no people of color around back then. It's historically accurate. Like, no, it's not historically accurate. Like, number one, it's not historically accurate at all. Number two, like, it's literally revisionist white supremacist fantasy, which I've talked about in my Mad Max video as well. You know, white supremacist fantasies, ideas that people of color were not in certain situations and did not exist, right? And it's just, like, very funny, especially to see that framing within Wild West, you know, American frontier type of works, you know, because there were a lot of people of color, like there were a lot. So when I originally saw the Magnificent Seven trailer, which had a Mexican, it had Denzel Washington, who's the lead, it had a Native American. I'm going to tell you who was who, just so you guys know. So Denzel Washington was, a black person, obviously. Lee Byung-hun played a Chinese immigrant. Manuel Garcia Ruffalo played a Mexican, and Martin Seinsmeyer, I hope I'm saying that right, is a Native American actor, and he played a Native American, a Comanche. So in your Magnificent Seven, you have a black person who's the lead, you have a Latinx person, which is accurate, you have a Chinese person, which is accurate, and you have a Native American, which is accurate. So you have 4 people of color out of your 7, and then you have basically 3 white guys, right? I was just like, this is awesome. Like, this is awesome. Like, this is like when people say diversity, it's normally a buzzword for like one black person, you know, or something like that. But like, that's really not diversity. Like, that's really not like representation. Like, let's get representation of the way the world is now, and also historically the way the world has been, because black people and other people of color have always been around in this fucking country. So when I saw the original trailer and I saw the cast, and you really, especially, it's very hard to see East Asian representation in Old West, Wild West settings, which again is hugely ironic considering Chinese Americans, for the most part, built the Transcontinental Railroad. But like, you barely see them, or when you do see them, it's in that very stereotypical, like, duck dong, like, kind of way, right? So, and it's even more ironic considering, again, that the original Magnificent Seven was taken from a Japanese property, Seven Samurai, right? It's just like, whiteness is so, like, the way that it functions and operates, and just, like, whitewashes everything it touches and just revises it into this, like, white supremacist version of itself. It's just fascinating. But so it was, and again, and it was directed by Antoine Fuqua, and he was also an executive producer. So I'm just sitting there watching it, and it's just like, I felt so empowered watching it, because like, Denzel Washington is the lead, he's the leader of the group, he gets all the gang together, and I love these like ensemble cast. We gotta like round up the posse and get the gang together, be it like a heist movie, be it, you know, just all these kind of movies where you have to like get the people together to like do the job. Like, I love those type of movies, and again, as we see more and more representation, I feel like a lot of these types of movies are getting like better and better, and like better to watch. And Antoine Fuqua is just like a really brilliant director. He's amazing. Like, I love pretty much all of his movies. He has a very nuanced way of directing, and I also love watching movies that have been directed by people of color, and especially by black people, because, and I said the same thing in my Creed video, a lot of the times there are things put in the movie that you just know if it had been a white director, like, those things wouldn't have gotten in there, because they just don't have that same point of view. Like, it's a unique perspective. Like, there's a scene where they're like all sitting down eating the food. There's a scene where Red Harvest, who's the Comanche warrior, he like lifts up the plate, and it has like beans and like bread and like a piece of meat, and he smells it and he puts it down, and he says, "White people's food is for dogs. Like, white people food is dog food." I yelled, right? Like, that is something that would not have made it into the film under a white director. Like, I'm sorry, it would not have made it into the film under a white director. Like, I'm sorry, but it would not. No, that's not happening. There's a scene where when Red Harvest arrives, because he's been like following them, he's been tracking them, we immediately see the reaction of the white people in the group. They grab their guns, and they get like so scared, and they're like looking around, and like one of them says like, "Oh, you never see just one Indian." I don't like using the word Indian, but just for what he said, you know, like, "Oh, there's never one Indian, but there's one Indian, there's always more," you know. And they're looking around, and they're full of fear. They're afraid of him just at the sight of him, because he's Native American, and he like has his like his makeup on, his like paint on, his war paint on, and he's riding on the horse, and he has like a dead like a deer like in front of him, and they're terrified. He's not being threatening, he's not doing anything, he's just riding up on his horse, and they're terrified. And it's like, again, it's like a very, and Denzel ends up talking to him in Comanche, and they have a conversation in Comanche. And again, it's like a very nuanced scene of the way that white people see people of color, and the way that they see people that are different, and the way that they see people as a threat, even if they're not even doing anything threatening. Like, I felt very much like, oh, like, this is an important scene. Like, he's making a statement like he's making a statement with this scene. Like, and again, these are scenes that I don't think this type of nuance and this type of nuanced direction and these type of ideas, you know, about this racism of that time period. And again, it's nothing like overt. There's no slurs used. There's barely even any cursing, to be honest with you, besides like the standard fuck shit, you know, whatever. It's done in a very nuanced way. And I feel like when I watch shows and movies that have been directed, you know, especially directed, but also written and produced by people of color, and especially Black people, I can really feel that nuance, you know. And that's why a lot of the times when we talk about diversity and variety and representation, you know, a lot of people think that just means like throwing people of color and Black people especially up on a screen, but it also means having us behind the scenes as well, having us writing, producing, directing, because all that stuff makes a difference in the way that, you know, that work comes out in the end, you know, the final product. And I just loved it. I did feel really empowered watching it. Like, look at this. Like, look at this cast. And look at this direction. And, like, I felt like I could relate to it, you know? I loved it. And the cast was so good. Everyone was so well cast. I love Vincent D'Onofrio. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm probably not. He was also Fisk in Daredevil. He was also in Law and Order. He was also Edgar Suit in Men in Black. Like, I love him. Just the whole cast was really good. They had a great chemistry. Ethan Hawke and Denzel Washington have worked together before with Antoine Fuqua on Training Day. So they especially had this really, really great, awesome chemistry. Ethan Hawke's character, Goodnight, was best friends with, I want to make sure I say his name, Byung-Hun Lee's character, who was Billy Rocks. They had this, like, awesome, amazing best friendship camaraderie that I loved. I just love seeing that type of relationship also portrayed on a screen. You know, friendship between two men is nice to see on a screen. That's not like frat boy, you know, fuck up, but like the friendship between two grown men, like, is also nice to see. And I just loved it. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to spoil anything. And everything I've said really isn't spoilers, like, so I don't want to delve too much into the plot. But like I said, I mean, and really the most empowering thing for me also was seeing Denzel as the leader. Like, Denzel is the clear leader also. So you have this, like, Black man that's, like, giving orders to these white people. And it's great. And he's not afraid of them. And there's no N-words used. And there's no calling anybody colored. You know, it was very empowering. It was very empowering. I would highly, highly, highly recommend watching it. Because it made me feel good. It made me feel really good. And again, just like the cast was great, the direction was great. It's a beautiful film. It's beautiful to watch. It was filmed on set in Louisiana. And so there's like the grass and not just in Louisiana, I believe also in Kansas. So you have like the grass and the mountains and the golden, what is it? Amber waves of grain and the purple mountain majesties. And you know, it really evoked that spirit of the West, which I've been really into recently, actually, ever since I read that quote about how spreading out West turned Europeans into Americans. I've never really thought about it that way, so I've just been thinking a lot about the West and this idea of the West, and especially this idea that white people have of the West, like as if we weren't there, you know, like, oh, it turned Europeans into Americans. There were a lot of other people there as well, not just Europeans. And I've also, Westworld is like coming out, and I've also been like really, really curious about that. So it was just a beautiful film that I highly, highly, highly recommend. It had an amazing story. It had a really great, tight plot. The cinematography is beautiful. The action sequences were amazing. You really had the sense that this is an ensemble cast. Really, nobody was given more shine over anyone else except kind of Denzel, because Denzel is like the lead of the group. But like the action sequences were incredibly done. I loved it. I really loved it. I kind of want to see it again. I just saw it, and I kind of want to go see it again. I really, 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 really enjoyed it. I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. Before I go, a lot of people have been asking me about Solange's seat at the table. I am going to do a review of Solange's A Seat at the Table, but there's a lot of you guys that are new. So for a lot of you guys that are new, and even people that are old and don't know this, when it's a work, 9 times out of 10, when it's a work that I can go back and revisit, I like to sit with my thoughts for a while on bodies of work that I can watch again. I kind of like to reflect. I like to, especially if it's something that I'm listening to, generally the way that I listen to music is I like to listen to it once through, like at home, and then I like to listen to it again once through in my car, and then I probably like to listen to it once through again, maybe in my headphones, and kind of just like stew on it and see how I feel about it before I film anything. And it's kind of the same thing with videos. I like to watch the video a bunch of times to just, because she also came out with like a couple of visuals, and Solange's album and those visuals just came out. So I'm not really into hot takes and like clickbait and like, oh, it just came out, I have to have the video up in 10 minutes, because I feel like a lot of things require reflection. For me personally, like maybe not for other people, but for me personally. So hopefully I'll have a video up by the end of this week. If not this week, then definitely next week. But you guys don't have to keep asking me over and over, because like I'm not going to rush through it. So sorry, but that's just not how I operate. So yeah, Magnificent Seven was great. Loved it. Say no to white revisionist history. Say yes to history that's, you know, historically correct. Say yes to variety. Say yes to black directors. Say yes to great action sequences and amazing plots and brilliantly filmed landscapes. And the music was really, really good. And the costumes were amazing. I really loved this movie. I really, 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 really fucked with this movie. I would 2 thumbs up. Go watch it. Definitely go see it. So, have any of you seen The Magnificent Seven? If you are going to leave comments about it, please no spoilers, because this movie really hasn't been out that long. So, I know that people like, again, like rush to like see shit and watch shit as soon as it comes out. But like, I don't want too many spoilers. So, food for thought as always. See you guys next time. Peace.